Just a reminder, more Europeans die every year from heat-related illness than Americans do from gun violence. That's a real fact. You can look it up. So don't let any of these Europeans tell you that they can't install AC in their buildings, right? They've installed plumbing before, they've installed electricity, they can install air conditioning, but their ignorance doesn't let them. And so they have more people that die from heat than gun violence. Make it make sense.
I've been living in Germany for 8 years, and I still do not understand the AC situation here. It is 100 degrees today, and nowhere has AC still. Restaurants, nope. Hospitals, nope. Shops, nope. What will it take to get ACs? Good morning from my foiled apartment. It's 8 in the morning. It is already 85 degrees Fahrenheit. This is with an AC and 2 fans blowing. The sun has not even hit our apartment yet, and we still have the hottest part of the day coming, and I'm scared.
So your government would rather let people die than to modify historic buildings, even though those same historic buildings were modified before for plumbing and electricity? Make it make sense, dude. Why does Europe hate its people so much? Even in the United States, the governments there open up cooling centers for people to escape the heat when they don't have AC. To me, it just seems like Europe wants its old people to die so they don't have to pay out pensions. You know what I'm saying? What is going on over there?
One thing the World Cup has taught me is that Americans might be onto something with this air conditioning stuff. Because growing up in Britain, we always treated air conditioning like a luxury. You'd hear things like, oh, you don't need all that, just open a window. And up to a point, that was reasonable advice, until climate change reached its super cyan form. Now, every time I turn on the news, it's day 3 of the unprecedented heat wave, aka summer. And then we spend the next week melting in our homes, moaning it's too hot. I have to say, after experiencing air conditioning in Miami, I get it. I'm not asking for the world. Sometimes progress is just being able to sleep at night.
As you may know, Europe is now going through a heat wave. Temperatures are reaching way above 100 degrees. It is literally unbearable. Thousands of people have already died, especially the elderly. And the other day I called my grandmother, who lives in Czechia, my birth country, and I told her how is she putting up with it and what is she doing to make herself colder? And I suggested, why don't you get air conditioning? She goes, oh no, I would never do that. I would rather die of heat than install air conditioning in my home. And I go, well, that's a very irrational belief. And she's not the only one. Most people in Czech, especially the older generation, have very negative stance towards air conditioning and unnatural ventilation. And this traces back to humoral medicine or folk medicine from like the 18th, 17th centuries in Europe, where uncontrolled wind was said to contribute to hardship for the body, and it was hard for the body to regulate the temperature, and it would get the body out of equilibrium. And so the remedy was stay inside, don't get exposed to natural elements like wind, and you'll get better. And so this sort of inherited belief has carried on for centuries, despite science moving on and obviously proving this inherited belief wrong. It's still part of the culture, and you can't just remove it from the culture, right? It has been practiced for centuries, and so a lot of the older generation now in Central Eastern Europe is very much against air conditioning and will never have it, including just a standalone fan, and would rather die from heat. I have to say, with the changing temperatures, as you know, Europe is getting hotter, summers are getting hotter and more unbearable. It didn't used to be that way 50 years ago, the temperatures would never go above 100 degrees. But now, as it's getting hotter, younger generations are realizing that air conditioning is a necessity, and so they are integrating it in their homes, and it is becoming more of a thing.
I really never understood why some Europeans refuse to get air conditioning in their houses. Like, I just never thought it was that big of a deal. Like, if it's hot out, just get air conditioning. That's until I stayed at my friend's house in Spain and I found out why at least some Europeans refuse to get air conditioning. See, I had this layover in Barcelona that I could extend, and my friend that just so happens to live in Barcelona graciously offered that I could stay at his place if I extended my layover. So I did. Anyways, upon arrival at his house, it is like 85 degrees outside. So I go into his house and I quickly realize that it is also 85 degrees inside. So after a little bit of kibitzing and catching up with my friend, I ask him, "Hey dude, do you have AC?" He goes on to be like, "Oh, we don't do that here. We don't need AC. It doesn't get that hot." But I was just like, "Okay, man, I guess you don't, but it feels like an oven in here to me." He goes on to be like, "In America, it's so much hotter. We don't need it here. It's cooler here." And I was just like, "No, like maybe in certain parts of the US, but last time I checked, it's a lot hotter here than back home." He goes, No. I checked Boston, New York, Philly. It's like 70 degrees. It's hotter." And I'm just like, "Yeah, 70 degrees. Like, that's a lot cooler." And he just looks at me like I'm dumb. Then I think, oh, he probably thinks it's in Celsius, not in Fahrenheit. So I'm like, "Oh, it's in Fahrenheit, not Celsius. So it's like a lot higher than Celsius." And he's like, "No, I know." He goes on to be like, "Oh, it's not that much of a difference. Like 70 degrees Fahrenheit is like 65 Celsius." He's like, "This is why you guys need the AC. It's much hotter." Mind you, he has never been to the US, and I'm like always trying to invite him here and give him a reason to come, and he's just like, "No, dude, I can't come there. It's just way too hot." And I always just thought that it was a lame excuse he was giving me, and he like didn't want to go to the US for some other reason. But no, he actually thinks that it's just way too hot here. He thinks the US is like a Mad Max environment. I just did the conversion, and 65 degrees Celsius is 149 degrees Fahrenheit. So either he thinks that I live in some sort of hellscape, or he's just really bad at math and science. Either way, I think that this is the reason why he thinks the Americans need the air conditioning and he doesn't. Are there other Europeans like this? Like, do some of y'all just think the US is some Mad Max hellscape?
Okay, the other video I talked about the air conditioning between America and the Europe countries, and I realized that it took a toll on this, right? Now today we are focusing on why are Europeans still reluctant to embrace air conditioning, right? So welcome back to this channel, and we want to talk about this. Like, when people think about the difference between the Europe and, let's say, the United States, they usually talk about food, they talk about healthcare, they talk about transportation, or say the work culture. But there is another topic that becomes increasingly important. Like, in recent years, there is something called air conditioning. So as heat waves become more frequent and more intense, one question keeps coming up, like, why do so many homes and buildings across Europe still lack air conditioning? So for many visitors, especially those that come from United States, the answer can be very, very surprising to them. Like, in as much of America, air conditioning isn't viewed as a luxury. It is simply part of everyday life. So whether you are at home, shopping, eating, at restaurant, or let's say riding in a car, staying cool is often taken for granted, right? And particularly in regions where summer temperatures regularly soars. So in many parts of Europe, however, the story has been very, very different. Like, historically, you find that many Europe countries experienced milder summers. So homes were designed to retain warmth during the long winters rather than to stay cool in extreme heat. So thick stones, small windows, shutters, and even the natural ventilation worked well for the climate people expected. Now, for decades, there simply wasn't much demand for the widespread of air conditioning, right? But the climate is changing, and recent summers have brought record-breaking temperatures to several European countries. So heat waves have lasted longer arrived more often and even placed increasing pressure on hospitals, public transportation, and even the aging infrastructure, right? So cities that were built to keep people warm are now struggling to even keep them cool. So yet despite these changes, many buildings still don't have air conditioning. So part of that comes down to infrastructure. Like you find that many historic buildings are protected by preservation laws. Like making renovations will become automatically very difficult and even expensive. So we have the older electrical systems, which also may require significant upgrades before even modern cooling system can be installed, right? So there are cultural attitudes. So some people still believe that fans are enough or that air conditioning is unnecessary, except during rare heat events, and also others about energy consumptions, environmental impact, or simply uh, prefer opening windows when possible. So you may also hear long-standing beliefs that air conditioning can cause illness. And as you have heard from the people, they say that each year there is a number of people who are brought to book who are dead, right? So while reporting changing from a heat outdoor environment to a very cool indoor one can feel uncomfortable. So modern research does not support the idea that properly maintained air conditioning itself causes common illness. So poor maintenance can affect indoor air quality, but that's different from the cooling system being inherently being harmful. So younger generations, frequently travelers, and many international visitors often see this differently, right? So after experiencing let's say climate control in countries where extreme heat is common, they are increasingly asking whether Europe should invest more in cooling infrastructure as summer become hotter. So this raises an important question and very interesting question, like should societies hold on to traditions that worked for the climate of the past, or should they adopt as conditions changes? There isn't a simple answer, right? And air conditioning certainly improves comfort and can reduce the health risk associated with extreme heat, particularly for older adults and people with underlying medical conditions. So at the same time, widespread air conditioning also increases electricity demand, and if powered by fossil fuels, can contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, right? So many experts argue that the best long-term approach combines efficiently cooling system with better building design, improved installation, shade, urban trees, and even the reflective roofs and clean sources of energy. Perhaps the biggest lesson is that climate adaptation isn't just about technology. It is also about culture, habits, public policies, and how quickly societies are willing to adjust to changing realities. So as temperature continue to rise around the world, countries everywhere, not just in Europe, will face difficult decisions about how to protect public health while also reducing environment impact. Now, I'd like to hear from you guys. Do you think air conditioning is becoming a necessity in more parts of Europe? Or should countries focus more on alternative ways of keeping buildings cool? I want you to share your thoughts and even in the comment below. And remember to keep this discussion respectful